if you explain the roles and, okay, listen, these are the roles we got to get fulfilled in this team. And for today, Sally, could you step in and play that Trailblazer role for today? And Roger, could you step in and be the director for today? And Frank, could you step in and be, we need an achiever right now? Whatever it is, it does two things. Number one, it makes it crystal clear that we are actually going to honor and respect and hear all of these different voices and perspectives on the team, which is crucial. You know, people talk about wanting psychological safety. Well, if we don't build some structure to allow people to actually speak up with these different perspectives, we don't really get the kind of psychological safety we might want.
Welcome to Leadership, the podcast where leadership meets real-world insights. In each episode, you can eavesdrop on exclusive conversations with top thought leaders, best-selling authors, and experts in leadership, communication, relationships, culture, and everything else that shapes your effectiveness in the workplace and in your personal life. Leadership is here for you. Now, here's our host, himself a seasoned coach and best-selling author, Dr. Roger Dean Duncan.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Leadership, where we unpack the ideas of disruptors, deep thinkers, and leadership renegades who challenge the status quo. In this episode, we'll dive into the anatomy of high-performing teams with someone who's spent decades decoding what makes them tick. My guest this time is Mark Murphy. Mark is the New York Times best-selling author and founder of Leadership IQ, a research and training firm. Mark's research findings have been featured in the New York Times, Harvard Business Review, Time, and the Wall Street Journal, among others. He's the author of multiple books, the latest of which is titled Team Players: The 5 Critical Roles You Need to Build a Winning Team. Whether you're leading a startup, scaling a nonprofit, or navigating the politics of a corporate boardroom, this conversation will help you rethink how you hire, how you collaborate, and how you lead. Mark Murphy, welcome to Leadership.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Let me ask, what inspired you to identify and define these 5 critical team roles?
So it actually started a number of years ago when I was doing all of my hiring for attitude work. And, so I'd spent a decade looking at, okay, well, organizations that, need to hire people with the attitude, it's attitudes that determine failures in the workplace. And I said, okay, cool, awesome. But the more we started to look at people that were actually doing it well, hiring the right kinds of attitudes for their organizations, what started to become clear, and it was weird, is we'd look at their teams and they'd go, yeah, they all have the right attitude, but they're kind of doing different things. Like, we got somebody who's more decisive, and we got this, they have the right attitude, but we got somebody who's kind of a crazy out of the box thinker. And, they have the right attitude to fit our culture, but we needed somebody who was super organized. And over and over again, we started to see that when people were hiring the right attitudes to fill out a team, they kept slotting into certain kinds of roles over and over again. And so I stopped and looked and said, okay, well, this is sort of weird that they all keep kind of grouping up the same way. Why is that? And so then we started to look at, all right, well, what is it when you have a group of people together? That's a little bit different than when you're just hiring like an individual, right? I just need a programmer. Okay, well, fine, they do their thing and life goes on. But when you're hiring a whole group of people, we started to say, well, what is it a group of people needs to do to be successful? And it's like, well, any team that works, they're going to be able to make decisions. They're going to be able to manage conflict. They're going to be able to manage to-dos and keep themselves on track. They're going to have like people who just roll up their sleeves and actually do work, like produce stuff.
Right.
You're going to have some crazy out-of-the-box thinkers. And over again, they said, you know what? These people seem to be hiring people that on the really successful teams, they seem to be hiring people that fit one of these core functions of a team. And that's really what prompted this whole thing. It was sort of random, noticing it. Like a lot of my studies are, it's not that I had some brilliant out of the box idea. It was more like, okay, we just looked at the world and said, that's kind of weird. Let's go dig a little deeper into that. And that's really how the team thing came about. It was very organic, just looking at what do really good groups do? Well, they're not all the same. Even though they may all have the right attitude, they may have good attitudes, they're not all the same. They're playing very different parts on a team. And I don't know why I hadn't thought about this before, but honestly, as I stepped back and thought about it, I'm like, you know what? This is like true of every group outside of business. Every sports team you look at, everybody plays different roles. Like I grew up in Buffalo, New York, so I am a lifelong Buffalo Bills fan. And you can look at the Bills, and there's some guys that are 6'8", some guys that are 5'7", some guys are 350 pounds, some guys are 180. There's a range of roles and talents and skills and mindsets. And all of these, it's a crazy collection. Every sports team, every rock band, every symphony, every jazz band, any group you look at, anywhere on the planet outside of what we do in business, they all embrace the notion of diverse roles. Business is like the only place where we stick people in a room and say we're going to play a team building game and everybody has to, bond. Everywhere else, they're like, no, you have a different talent. So we're going to let you use your unique, different talent.
Well, if you would, please briefly describe each of the 5 roles and tell us how they complement each other.
So the first role I start with is the obvious one. It's the director. The director is kind of your decider of last resort. Now what that means is that every group that works really well is going to have somebody capable of going, okay, gang, we've talked about it enough. We haven't reached a conclusion. I'm going to step in and make a decision. Because otherwise, you just spin your wheels indefinitely, right? That's just incredibly painful. Then there is a stabilizer, and the stabilizer is sort of like a taskmaster type. They're the person that keeps the group on track with their Gantt charts and timelines and milestones and deadlines and to-dos. They make sure the group actually accomplishes stuff. Then you have the very classic, what we typically think of as, team player, is what I call the harmonizer. And this is the emotional intelligence person. This is the person who ensures that the group dynamics are running reasonably well, that if conflict bubbles up, it gets resolved and surfaced and, we reach some amicable solution. It's the person that they notice when somebody on the team is either fallen asleep or completely disengaged or, scowling and, folding their arms and, just annoyed. They're the person that can pick up on that. Then you've got your achiever. And this is the person that says, and a team can have a lot of these folks, this is the person that says, oh, listen, I don't need to be in charge. I just tell me what to do and I will go do it. This is like the person that rolls up their sleeves and actually does stuff. And then we've got the trailblazer, and that is the person that every so often they come up with some out-of-the-box idea that challenges the group's thinking, forces them to reevaluate. And sometimes it can be annoying because it's like, okay, we've been dealing with this thing for 3 months now, and we're getting stale. We're stuck now. And then the trailblazer comes in with this, I got this crazy out-of-the-box idea. And the group's like, but it turns out it's that one holy mackerel idea that unlocks the group. That's the trailblazer. And the interesting thing that we discovered about this is that a team can have, any normal team, because there's 5 roles, but, how often do you have a team of exactly 5 people? Not very often, right?
Right.
And so a team can have multiple achievers, like workers, doers, totally fine. That doesn't hurt the team at all. A team can have a couple of harmonizers, works great. Can have a couple of stabilizers, keep it on track, to-dos, all that, great. But a team can't really have more than 1, 2 at the absolute maximum number of directors, because we've all been on teams where you get multiple people who think they're the one that's in charge and needs to be making the final decision. And when teams have multiple directors, it just turns into an ego contest. I'll use a nice term for it. An ego contest over, who gets to decide and who gets to win this particular debate. And it's just terrible. And what I always tell groups is that, listen, you can tolerate one or two, more than one, sometimes two Trailblazers. But the reality is that most of the time, organizations struggle to get one Trailblazer on their team. So the odds that you're going to have a team loaded with like 8 Trailblazers is just not that high, because there's not nearly as many people consider themselves or act like Trailblazers. Many more people want to fall into that achiever role, which is totally fine.
In the spirit of emergent leadership, isn't it true that one person could fill more than one role?
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things about these roles that we discovered is that these roles aren't, I like to say these are roles, they're not your identity. So there are times where you will play a director role on a team that maybe is struggling to make a decision, and you look at it and say, all right, well, somebody's got to be the director here. And maybe even it's not my natural state, but I'm the best we got to fill that role. And so I'm going to have to fill that role. But then I move to a different team, and I may now have to step in and play the stabilizer. Or imagine a small startup where you've got a team of 2 or 3 people. And it's like, well, okay, we're all going to have to wear multiple hats simultaneously. And so there are times I find this, even if I'm just working with 2 other people, for example, I may find myself playing Trailblazer, but then I may have to pop in and also play director from time to time, even though, it's okay, maybe that's not the role I necessarily wanted to play that day, but that's what we need. And so it's really, I'm again, really glad you brought that up, because it's in any given situation, we may have to swap, or, I have on my team a woman who's just an absolute master of being a stabilizer. But, a couple of months ago, she was out sick for 2 days. And it's like, oh, all right, I don't want to have to be the stabilizer, but I guess I gotta, because she's not here right now. And so, somebody's got to do it. And I'm our, sadly, next best alternative. And that's the thing, is that sometimes at any given day, you're like, listen, if we don't have somebody to keep us on track with the to-dos, if we don't have somebody to shake up our thinking or make a hard decision, the group is going to suffer that day. And so we may all have to step in and play one or more roles, even if they're not our natural.
Seems to me like it would be helpful if we're a team leader pulling together a team to be really explicit about expectations of different players on the team playing different roles and talking fairly explicitly about these roles. Have you found that to be true?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And and I'm sure, as and all the work you do, listen, being transparent about these things, 99% of the time is absolutely the way to go. And it makes it easy when if you explain the roles and go, okay, listen, these are the roles we got to get fulfilled in this team. And, for today, Sally, I'd like could you step in and play that Trailblazer role for today? And Roger, could you step in and be the director for today? And Frank, could you step in and be we need an achiever right now? Whatever it is, it does 2 things. Number one, it makes it crystal clear that we are actually going to honor and respect and hear all of these different voices and perspectives on the team, which is crucial.
Sure.
People talk about wanting psychological safety. Well, if we don't build some structure to allow people to actually speak up with these different perspectives, we don't really get the kind of psychological safety we might want. The other thing it does, though, is it allows the person who you're asking to play this role to kind of, put on a different mask for the day. Like, I'm going to amplify, like they're inhabiting a role, not just in like a, job sense, but in almost like an actor sense. Like, I am going to bring this character of the director, of the stabilizer, of the Trailblazer, and I'm going to throw myself into it and bring that voice and really kind of show it and broadcast it for the team, which all that does is improve the quality and diversity of our thinking.
Well, sure, and that sort of expands an individual's behavioral portfolio, if you will. They realize that they really can play more than one role, and occasionally they need to.
That is such a huge point. One of the things that, I see when people are trying to, talk about wanting to develop and grow their leadership career. All right, well, in any leadership career, we know this. You're guaranteed to have to, at one point or another, play every one of those 5 roles. There are days you're going to have to roll up your sleeves and do work. You're going to have to make tough decisions. There are days you're going to have to be the harmonizer and smooth over some ruffled feathers. And, you can see, for example, often in failed CEOs, the ones that are, they get fired, usually unceremoniously, that they are often missing the ability to play one of these roles. Now, in a lot of CEO firings, one of the roles they're often missing is the harmonizer role. They've, forgotten or never mastered, never learned how to, develop some empathy or tap into the dynamics of the group or kind of read the room, develop some other awareness and emotional intelligence. To be a fully formed leader, you are going to have to learn how to play each of these roles. And again, everybody's going to have one of these roles they are just naturally more attuned to. And that's, just how the world works, right? But if you can balance yourself out and at least develop a minimum level of competence for each of these capacities, well, now you are a much more well-rounded leader, and you're going to be able to move in a lot of different directions.
Well, I can envision a leader after a team has wrestled with an issue and made some decisions, sitting down with them and having a debriefing and talking about the behaviors that each of them exhibited and what the contribution was to the solution to the problem or whatever, to make them even more conscious of the importance of playing these roles and the contribution that each role makes to the success of the team.
That is such an important point because it ties into 2 really critical issues. One is just the basic function of debriefing, which is so critical to developing our self-awareness, right? And developing the group's awareness of doing an after-action review or hot wash or deep, and call it whatever you want. Every branch of the military has their own term for it. But it's funny, it actually has been shown to increase group performance if you have a little bit of a discussion and go, okay, well, were there roles that we were missing today? Was there something we didn't do enough of? It's funny, we'll do this exercise sometimes and you'll see a team say, yeah, I don't feel like we really gave enough discussion to who's actually going to do what by when, like deadlines and stuff.
Right.
And it's like, well, okay, which role was that? Well, that's the stabilizer. Okay, well, who are we missing today? We're missing the stabilizer. And so, okay, that's something we know that we are going to need to work on, that we are going to need to prioritize moving forward. Another piece of it, too, is something that is often called reciprocal expertise affirmation, which is just, the fancy way of saying, I acknowledge and value what you do. And I acknowledge that you bring this different perspective and that you are doing something cool. And it's important to the team and to the group. And what we found, and there are a lot of studies on this, not just ours, but, going back a decade, that when a team acknowledges that these other roles play a vital contribution, even if they're not the most recognized or heralded of the roles, that it makes the people in those roles feel great and they perform better as a result. And, it's funny that the single best real life example I can think of is every year in the NFL when quarterbacks buy their offensive linemen.
You're right. Yeah.
Like they buy them golf carts and
exactly
AP feeds and Rolexes. And it's like, it's basically saying, listen, you are the guys that keep me alive. I appreciate that.
Exactly. I noticed that I didn't get sacked.
Exactly. I'm still standing upright thanks to you, and I want to share some of the wealth and acknowledge that. But that is like the best example ever of, yeah, it's the star recognizing the people that are central to his success. He knows it. And it's funny because the rest of the world doesn't always see it. It's not like they're voting offensive linemen for MVP, but you ask a quarterback, who's your best friend out there? And they go, look at who I just bought a golf cart for.
Yeah.
I bought a $20,000 custom golf cart for every single member of my offensive line because they are that important to me.
Yeah. Yeah. So, how can leaders diagnose role imbalances within their teams? I can see a quarterback doing that, a coach doing that in a corporate or business environment. How can that work?
So one of the simplest, easiest ways to do this is simply to ask. And one way I like to ask this is have everybody answer basically the question, of these 5 roles, what's the role that others would say you most typically play on our team? Now, you can have everybody answer the question, what role do you think you are? And that works pretty well. But when you ask people, tell me what role you think others would say you most typically play on our team. There is a weird quirk of humanity that people are better at gauging what they think others think of them than they are doing their own analysis of themselves. Humans are not known as the best at, critical self-awareness.
Right.
But if you ask them, well, what does Sally think I'm doing in the team? I'm actually weirdly more accurate in guessing what Sally thinks about what role I'm playing in the team. And so if you just do that one simple question, everybody goes around the room. And even if you take a flip chart and say, okay, here are the 5 roles, and here's who we've got in every one of these roles, that quickly gives you a pretty clear picture of what do we have and what are we missing. And one of the things about that is you can kind of quickly assess, okay, we are really missing somebody. We're missing a stabilizer. We're missing somebody to keep us on track. Or, we're missing somebody who's willing to make that hard decision. Or we're missing somebody with the out-of-the-box ideas. Once you know that, then you can ask a second question, which is there a role you would really like to develop? Or a role you would like to play more on this team? And what that does is it allows people to say, I've always wanted to try out that Trailblazer thing, and I don't really do it right now, and for whatever reason, but I would like to try that out. And it's might help the group because we seem to be missing a Trailblazer, but also it'd be kind of a cool thing for me to develop. That might actually keep me engaged and interested, and I could see how that could benefit my career. And so it's a kind of a cool way, a fun way to just allow people to say, yeah, here's what I'm currently doing, and this is what the makeup of our group is. But then here's where I'd like to grow and kind of expand my skill set a bit. And this allows you too, as the leader, you may look at your team, and if you've got somebody that you're kind of mentoring and growing, you may look at them and say, you know what, I know you want to play the stabilizer, but I'm going to tell you, I know where you want to get to in your career, and I'm telling you the role you need to add to your repertoire is actually the Harmonizer. So I'm going to ask you to start to step in bit by bit and play that Harmonizer role, because that's the one that is going to be most beneficial to you in your next job. And so it allows you as a leader to kind of play with, how do I want to grow these folks? Is it going to be more self-directed? Am I going to kind of coach them and guide them a bit? It's kind of up to you. But as long as you know where the strengths and weaknesses of the team are to start, that tells you, kind of what you need to bolster.
Well, if I were hiring someone or interviewing someone for a job, I would be inclined to ask them to give me some examples of where they have worked in a team and what role did they play, and assuming that they haven't read your book, so they wouldn't have the labels, but they would have some label of some kind, and have them report to me how they felt they contributed to the team. And then if I decided to hire them, I would introduce them to your book, frankly, because I think it's really helpful to have these labels, if you will. And then when I'm coaching the team, using the labels would be very helpful. I might recruit someone, to use football terms, who played tight end in college, but he might make a tremendous linebacker or a defensive end. And, that does happen. Sometimes players are recruited for one position, but then they're moved to another position. And a really thoughtful leader, I think, as you've just said, would coach around these things and help people develop skill with multiple roles, because they're going to be playing multiple roles.
That is such a huge point, that it's, which hits on so many issues, right? One is you want to know not just what somebody did in their previous job, the technical skills and all of that and their titles and everything, but like what role did they actually play on the team, which allows you to start to reveal, like, okay, well, how did they interact with others? What were they part of the support? Were they driving the team? Were they in more of a helper capacity? How were they interacting? And then matched up with what you know about your current team and what roles are you really need help with. Well, that gives you a whole nother level of insight, all the analysis you just talked about. But then the other point is that it starts to tell you, like, where you could have somebody that they've got an extra talent. The Jets recently, the New York Jets football team recently won their first game of the season. And they did it, and I think it was Breece Hall, their running back. The play that basically won them the game is he ended up, they did a little flea flicker thing, and he, instead of running the ball, he threw a touchdown pass. Now, he's a running back, but apparently he played some quarterback in high school.
Right.
And,
right.
And knowing that you have a running back who can also throw, because he's actually done this before in his life.
That opens up some possibilities, doesn't it?
Oh, my goodness, right? And so if you know that you've got somebody on your team that, even though they're not, a harmonizer right now, you're putting them more in a director role or whatever, but they've been that, that diplomatic type prior points in their career, and they have that capacity. Oh, wow. That opens up a whole new world.
Well, using these 5 roles, can a dysfunctional team be rebuilt, or do you have to start fresh?
So the short answer is it depends on the root of the dysfunction. And so by that, I mean, one of the things that we noticed about poor performing teams, like if we asked somebody, tell us about the worst team that you're on. So we might ask a leader, for example, tell us about the best team you're on, and then diagnose all the roles and the people on the team. And then we'd ask them, we'd flip it around and we'd go, okay, well, now tell us about the worst team you're on, and tell us about the people and the roles and all that stuff. One of the things we noticed is that when people started telling us about the worst teams they were on, one of the distinguishing characteristics was that the teams were hugely out of balance with the roles. So it'd be things like a team with 5 directors where all day long,
right,
those people are just fighting with each other over who gets to be in charge. Or it'd be like a team it'd be all harmonizers. And so everything felt great, but nothing ever got accomplished because nobody was willing to make a really tough decision. Or, it was things like that. And so the reason I say it depends is if you have a team where people are willing to switch up the hierarchy a little bit to get them more adaptive with their hierarchies and say, you know what, we're going to rotate. We cannot have 5 directors in every single meeting because this is consuming inordinate amounts of time when we're fighting with each other over who gets to make the decision. For this meeting, for this next month, whatever it is, Bob is going to make the decision. Then it's Sally's going to be the decider. Or on this issue, it's going to be Sally. On this issue, it's going to be Frank. Whatever the thing is, we have to break it up. And if people are willing to shake up the roles, and what I find is that, 80% of the time plus, people are willing to shake it up, because generally people don't love being on dysfunctional teams. So you have that as a starting point. Like, listen, if this is going to help this thing be better, and the catch is that if they know that, yeah, we're going to rotate it around and mix it up until we find the right mix, people are so much more open to that, because they're like, okay, you're not saying that I can never make a decision again. What you're saying, though, is that we're going to shake it up and we're going to move it. And as long as the team is willing to recognize that we've got this imbalance and we've got this problem, which oftentimes they'll know that there is a problem. They might not always know why they have the problem that they have. They just know that it feels bad and it's painful. But as long as they're not in denial about that, then yeah, most of the time you can do a little shaking up of things and be okay.
Your change initiative has the budget. The strategy looks solid, and everyone's nodding along in the meetings. But for some reason, it's going nowhere. Dr. Roger Dean Duncan knows why. After 40 years in the trenches with top business leaders, he knows that change fails when organizations lack the right foundations: trust, accountability, and real communication. Dr. Duncan's free 10-minute assessment shows you exactly where your organization stands. Answer a few straightforward questions that reveal your true change readiness level. Don't waste months discovering the hard way. Get your free assessment today at leadershop.net/change. Again, that's leadershop.net/change.
A lot of times when people think their team is not working well, it doesn't occur to them that they might be part of the problem. It's often somebody else who's the problem.
It's funny because it is that lack of self-awareness, and you see this a lot. I'll give you an example. I was talking to a team, and the leader of this team was griping that people, they just I can't get them to do anything. Nobody's proactive and nobody takes initiative. And, so I start every meeting by telling them sternly, let's pause for a second. Because if you're starting every meeting with a little 10-minute speech about how everybody stinks, I can tell you why nobody's speaking up for the rest of the meeting.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to call the opposite of psychological safety, that's pretty much what you're doing right now. And listen, that's where we need, a dose of self-awareness about why this group is having some issues.
So what seem to be the most common leadership blind spots that prevent team cohesion? What do leaders often miss?
A couple of things stand out. One, and this will sound maybe slightly heretical, but one of the blind spots I see a lot is the notion that team building is helpful. And let me clarify, because that doesn't sound good. Oftentimes when we talk about, quote unquote team building, what a lot of folks mean is kind of the forced fun sort of activities. Like, okay, we're all going to Dave & Buster's, or we're all going to build a rocket ship out of toothpicks, or whatever.
We're going to sing Kumbaya.
Exactly. And one of the things, even just in the description of the roles, you start to get a sense that not everybody loves that kind of stuff. Achievers, for example, don't tend to love those sorts of activities, because to be good at forced fun kind of team building, you have to be pretty extroverted. You have to have a pretty outward sense of humor. You have to be pretty open to new experiences and be willing to laugh at yourself. Now, those are lovely characteristics. However, they are not universal characteristics. There are plenty of brilliant, successful, high-achieving people on your teams that are not extroverted, that do not love to laugh at themselves, that aren't necessarily gregarious. Their sense of humor might be more dry than it is outward. And so all of a sudden, we realize that a lot of what we count as team building is geared towards a very particular personality type. And it is a personality type that may not represent even half of the team. And so one of the things that, in terms of overcoming this blind spot, if we think about it in the context of these 5 roles, is to recognize that some of the people on your team, they don't want to be in charge. They don't want to go out in front. They don't want to get an award in front of a large group of people. They tell them what to do, and they'll go off and do it brilliantly. But, I think back to the story of when Steve Wozniak was, founding Apple with Steve Jobs. And one of the reasons, and so Wozniak is the one who actually built the Apple I. He's the one who built the computer. Steve Jobs figured out how to brand it, but Woz built it. And the reason he resisted for years starting his own company was he said explicitly, I never want to be a manager, not ever. I don't want to deal with the people issues. I don't want to make those decisions over people. I know. And it wasn't until one of his friends came and told him and said, listen, you can start the company, hire somebody to do the management stuff. You can sit in the closet and build computers all day if you want to. And it wasn't until he heard that he said, oh, okay, cool. Well, let us start a company. And that's the thing, is that there are brilliant people like him out there that, like, if they want to sit in the closet, you just feed them assignments. Cool. Don't make them go to, paintball with you, because that's not, it's not going to help bond the team. It's going to make them distinctly uncomfortable. So
in fact, they can do more harm than good.
Exactly. And so one big blind spot that I see the teams and leaders of teams have is the presumption that everybody wants what they want. And, if you think of you and I know, of course, and if you think about it for a second, it's like, it becomes pretty obvious that not everybody wants what I, as the team leader, want. And so acknowledging that is absolutely mission critical. Another blind spot that ties to that pretty closely, and I see this with a lot of leaders, is the idea that, well, I have to play all 5 roles. I'm the boss, so on this team, I have to be the harmonizer, but I also have to be the decider, and I also have to be the trailblazer and come up with the out of box, and I also have to manage the duties of, oh my gosh. Okay, A, that's not true. And B, not only are you burning yourself to a crisp, but you're not developing the people on your team. One of the guys I was interviewing, I talked to him a bunch over the years, but pinged them for the book, is a guy named Julian Francis, and he's the CEO of Beacon Building Supplies, and they're a multi-billion-dollar company. And what Julian was saying to me, he said, Mark, I don't want to make that many decisions. He's like, yes, on my executive team, for example, I am the director, but I have kind of a rule that I don't want to make a decision unless it is a 50-50 decision. And so what does that mean? And he said, what it means is that if somebody comes to me and I ask them, and they say, boss, we got this decision we got to make. And I ask them, which way are you leaning? And they say to me, I'm 65% leaning towards choice A, 35% choice B. Then I say to them, great, then you've already made the decision. You're hesitant and you want me to, take it over for you, but truly you've already made that decision. You really don't. You've already done your analysis. You know the right decision to make in this case. So I want to empower you, and I'm going to nudge you to go make that decision because you've already done the analysis. You know which way you want to lean. And it is so easy for a leader to say, okay, fine, I'll make the decision because that's what I do. But it develops a level of codependency with the people on the team because they are not learning how to make that call. And they really have, when Julian asked them, which way are you leaning? They indicate that they've already pretty much made up their mind. They're just, for whatever reason, a little bit scared to pull the trigger on it. And so now what he's doing is empowering them, but also nudging them to take that leap. Go ahead, make that decision. So what's funny about it is that Julian is a director. He's a great director. But he views it as, I just need to ensure that the decisions get made. It does not mean that I need to make every single decision for myself. So if I'm holding people accountable to make the decisions that they know how to make, cool. Doesn't mean I need to step in and do it all myself. So not only is he making his job a little bit easier, but he's also building bench strength, developing all of the people underneath him and helping them grow and kind of, step into bigger and bigger roles because they're learning how to do exactly this kind of stuff.
Exactly. Well, now in today's workplace, we often see multiple generations. So how do generational differences show up across these roles?
One interesting thing, and it is one of the, I had a bad feeling you were going to ask it because it's one of the trickier questions in this. And so my short answer is that it is often muddled. And one of the things I am seeing leaders have to do increasingly is actually have this transparent, blatant conversation with their younger generations, assuming that we're talking about a leader who has, Gen Ys, Gen Zs coming into the workplace working for them, is to actually go through and sit down and explain that, okay, here are the roles, and this is the role I need you to fulfill for right now. But there are these other capacities that you are going to have to develop. Now, one thing in particular, and you will hear complaints about this. So what I will say is anytime we talk about generations, I just want to put one big caveat out there because I hate painting an entire group of, let's say, 23-year-olds with one universal blush any more than I hate doing it with 54-year-olds.
Of course.
But there are some trends. And one of the trends I hear a lot from leaders is that some of their social skills are not as good. And they don't understand always the importance of, like, for example, face-to-face conversation, or why they have to go reach out multiple times. Like why I can't just snap my fingers and issue an edict that Department XYZ over there goes and does what I want them to do instantly. Like they haven't figured out the nuances of that people stuff yet.
Right.
And so one of the things I am seeing increasingly is leaders having to, when they explain these roles, really convey the importance of things like the Harmonizer role. Like, this is why the Harmonizer role is important, because the bosses over there at corporate, they won't approve what we want if you don't build those relationships, if you don't smooth over those ruffled feathers. And even if you're not ready to do that role yourself, what I want you to see is the value of having a harmonizer on the team and the value that that brings. And so the harmonizer is one of those roles that is acutely attuned to often political realities in an organization where, it's kind of by definition, when you're dealing with the people side, emotional intelligence side of things, you start to recognize that just because it's the right thing to do doesn't mean it's going to get approved, because, there are egos and politics and all normal human stuff get involved. Well, understanding the importance that a harmonizer plays on a team, that is one that it's funny that the younger generation seems to have less appreciation for that at the moment, in the same way that you'll see sometimes CEOs have less appreciation for the harmonizer role. And in both cases, it's like, listen, if you can find a couple of good harmonizers throughout your career, they're going to be the ones who will save you from doing something really stupid or saying something really stupid, because they're the ones who can catch it, because that's what they're highly skilled at doing. You may make great decisions, but they're going to catch the politics.
Well, and you need to make it safe for them to do it.
Exactly.
So how do remote or hybrid teams affect role visibility?
So one of the issues in the remote world is that a lot of remote meetings are geared towards a couple of the roles, but not as geared towards a couple of the others. So for example, Zoom meetings tend not to be as geared towards really showcasing Harmonizers, and they tend not to be as geared towards showcasing Trailblazers. So you think about it, with the Harmonizers, we've got kind of that emotional intelligence, being able to, if somebody is mentally checked out of a meeting, a Harmonizer is the person that will kind of pick up on that. Well, if you're over Zoom and everybody's got their cameras off, we've kind of neutered the Harmonizer's ability to.
Right.
But how do they know, right?
Sure.
And at the same time, with the Trailblazers having like real out of the box, brainstorming, crazy thinking, ideate the next big product launch, whatever it is we're doing, that is harder over Zoom and remote and virtual meetings as well. And so right there, you've got two roles that it's harder. It's not impossible. It's just more difficult to do remotely. And so Zoom meetings are really good for divvying up tasks, checking in on to-dos, maintaining timelines, making and communicating a decision. So it's really good for directors, really good for stabilizers, much harder for Harmonizers and Trailblazers, and achievers would rather skip the meeting and just do their work.
Just leave me alone.
Exactly. So what I always tell folks with Zoom meetings and the like is, listen, it just takes a little more work. It's not that you can't do it. And weirdly, here's one really strange quirk. Usually what you have to do to amp up the Harmonizer side of things is exact opposite from what you have to do to amp up the Trailblazer side of it. Here's a real concrete example. If you're going to have a meeting over Zoom or something where you want to actually have a little more human connection, having cameras on is really helpful, because at least I can't see what your legs are doing. You can't see what my legs are doing. But, it's okay, if I'm on Zoom, you at least get the upper half of my body, right? And so at least see if my eyes are open. It's a start. It's
that's a start.
It's a good jumping off point. But here's the thing. There's been some recent research when it comes to real creative brainstorming over Zoom. So for most people, when they're doing kind of creative thinking, they will usually look to the upper left, right? Because we're accessing the right side of the brain. So, a lot of people, when they're thinking and trying to access other parts of the brain, do that creative ideation, they'll often be looking upper left. Well, here's the weird thing. When you're on Zoom with cameras on, you're making eye contact. You're not actually diverting your eyes to the upper left where they would normally go when you're doing creative thinking. And so a few studies have found that it can actually reduce the creativity of ideas that people are coming up with when they're staring straight ahead, making eye contact the entire time. And so we started experimenting with having people do, when they're doing creative brainstorming, the Trailblazer out of the box kind of stuff, turn the cameras off. Let people put their feet up at their desk. Who cares? Let them, wear a t-shirt, put their feet up. Whatever they do in their normal creative, brainstorming kind of place.
Yeah.
Do that. Turn the cameras off. And so it's weird, but you might actually have the exact opposite. Okay, we're going to do a meeting dedicated to just doing some creative out-of-the-box thinking, cameras off, and we're just going to put up a whiteboard in Zoom and we're going to get crazy. Put your feet up, do whatever. But then we're going to have another meeting 2 days from now where we're going to do more of this connection and kind of check in and see what's motivating and demotivating people and all that. And now we're going to put cameras on so we can actually see each other. So weird quirks, but it's paying attention to these roles helps a lot with that.
Well, it's a different world, and it's a fast-moving world, which brings up this question. In what practical ways can AI be used to enhance people's leadership and team performance?
Such a huge issue these days. It's funny, put that under the heading of things we would not have been talking about 3 years ago.
Oh, sure.
And today can't not talk about. One of the really cool things that I think is actually a really productive use of AI is if you think about the roles on the team, AI is at a point now where you can actually have it represent one of the roles on your team that you might be missing. For example, and I'll use a personal example here. For one of the boards I sit on, we were actually missing one of our board members. And I've had this in a couple of cases now where, somebody took a leave for a couple months. One person, took a trip around the world with their grandkids, crazy stuff. But we were missing a role. And so you can actually give ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or whatever one you prefer, a prompt and basically say, listen, my team is faced with this following decision. We are trying to decide whether or not to purchase this new technology and what happens if we do purchase this technology. Okay, blah, blah, blah. So I type in my decision. Then I type in and I say, listen, my team right now is missing our stabilizer. This is the person who is concerned with to-dos and deadlines and milestones and keeping projects on track, etc. As we evaluate this decision, please give me some questions that a stabilizer would ask us to force us to think about their kinds of issues. Or if I'm missing my harmonizer, for example, okay, I tell ChatGPT I'm missing my harmonizer. This is the person who is concerned with team dynamics and emotional responses and human connectedness and whatever. And I give it that prompt. Give me some questions that a harmonizer would ask me. And it will literally come back and say, okay, Mark, you're deciding whether to use this software. Here's what a harmonizer would be asking you. How invested are people in this software already? If you take it away from them, how are they going to feel? Are they going to feel like you've abandoned all of the training they put into the previous use of the software? Whatever. And they're going to give you this deep dive questions on all of the things that a emotionally astute, emotionally intelligent, politically savvy person would ask. And so even if you happen to be missing your harmonizer that day, it's somebody who can, it's close, right? It is, and it's close enough that on a practical level, it is infinitely better than not having the harmonizer's perspective.
It's amazing what AI can do.
It's funny. I will even tell CEOs, like, listen, before you send out that house-wide memo, that corporate enterprise-wide memo,
right?
Give it to ChatGPT and ask it to read it from the perspective of a harmonizer. What would a harmonizer say about this memo? And we've actually done this a few times. And I've given it, and I won't shame the CEOs who wrote it, but you've seen them. I mean, we cover them all the time at Forge, right? These horrible CEO layoff memos that go out.
Right.
And if you give it to ChatGPT and go, what would an emotionally astute harmonizer say about this memo? And they will rip it to shreds.
Exactly.
And it's like, man, for $20 a month, you couldn't have had ChatGPT read the layoff memo before you sent it out?
Yeah.
Because it would have given you that perspective. Maybe not as good as a real harmonizer on your team, but way better than not having one. And, it's to your benefit to have AI play. If you're missing a role on your team, let AI step in and do it.
Sure. Makes a world of sense. Well, one final question, Mark. If you could add a sixth role today, other than AI, based on current workplace trends, what might it be?
So the role that I would probably add would be a hybrid role. And it would be either a kind of a director in training, which is essentially learning how to make some decisions that are maybe not the earth-shattering, like do we buy or sell a company kind of decisions, like not, huge, but let's take that step forward and start making some more baby decisions. Like, we don't necessarily, like the example I gave with Julie and the CEO, like what's the step below those decisions? That would be a useful role, I think, because I see people having to play that increasingly. And the other one is less of adding a sixth role, but I would start pushing people to put more emphasis on the Trailblazer role. And one reason is this. We did a study and we asked managers, tell us the characteristics of, innovative people on your team. And so they said, oh, they're out of the box. They challenge convention. They, break with the conventional wisdom, all the normal things we think of with innovators. And we said, okay, now, give us the characteristics. We're going to ask you about your favorite and your least favorite employees. And so first we're going to ask you about the characteristics of your favorite employees. And so we gave them a list of characteristics. And what they said was things like they follow the rules, they don't challenge what I'm asking them to do, they just, they're compliant and, they color within the lines. It's all that kind of stuff. And then we ask, okay, what are the characteristics of your least favorite employees? And it was like they challenge convention, they buck the trends, they're, always trying to break through walls. It was all the characteristics that they used to describe innovative employees. And so here's the thing. Even though everybody says we love innovation, and you will never find a company that says we hate innovation. They all say they love innovation. But the practical reality is their least favorite employees are often the most innovative. And it's what is interesting is that there are, I think partly because of that and partly just because we don't encourage innovation nearly as much, there are often not enough trailblazers on a team. It's not uncommon to find a team that doesn't have a true trailblazer. And so that would be one where I would emphasize a little more. And the way I would emphasize it is it's not just a matter of go find somebody crazy innovative. It's also be aware that you might be the person suppressing their innovation.
Right.
And I think that's an important lesson for any company that says they want innovation. You may say that with your words, but your actions may say something a little different.
Well, that's why during a change effort, when people are facing folks who resist, I tell them, don't try to push down the resistors. They may be asking the most important questions.
That is such a huge point. And it is because sometimes the difficult person on your team, they're not actually difficult. They're just bringing a perspective that you may not want to hear, but that you may need to hear.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for joining us on Leadership. Mark has reminded us that teams don't fail because people aren't smart or skilled. They fail because the roles that drive momentum are missing, misunderstood, or misaligned. Mark has reminded us that building a winning team isn't about cloning ourselves or hiring for charisma. It's about strategically gathering the right mix of thinkers, doers, and challengers who can push each other towards something greater. As you head back to your own team, ask yourself this: do I really know the roles my people play? And am I leading them in a way that lets each one thrive? If you found this episode valuable, please share it with your team, your network, or anyone else who's ready to lead with more curiosity, courage, and care. And be sure to leave a review. Even a single sentence fuels the algorithms that promote the great content that the Leadership podcast offers. And for free resources to help you in your leadership journey, go to leadership.net. That's leadership.net. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, stay safe, be happy, and spread good cheer wherever you go. For Leadership, I'm Roger Dean Duncan.